The massive mall was crushingly packed at rush hour. A young woman stumbled from the elevator, pale, trembling, desperately grasping the cold wall. The crowd instantly backed away, judging. "She's faking it for attention. Disgusting." Her breathing was ragged as she choked out, I, I can't walk. The pain." No one helped, fearing involvement. Single dad Daniel Hayes with his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, stopped instantly. Daniel rushed forward, catching her light body just before she hit the floor. She gripped his shirt. "I'm sorry." Ignoring a woman screaming, "She's acting." Daniel lifted her up, stunning the entire concourse. Daniel Hayes, at 36, carried the immense, often invisible weight of single fatherhood. His life was defined by the relentless rhythm of work, a quiet penance he took on after his wife's tragic passing from a terminal illness 3 years prior. He was a skilled technician, specifically responsible for the intricate, life-saving imaging equipment used in major medical centers. The stakes of his repair work were high. He handled machines that printed the difference between life and death. But his own income was modest, requiring meticulous, often painful budgeting for himself and his daughter, Lily. Yet despite the constant financial suffocation and the chronic exhaustion that lived behind his eyes, Daniel fiercely maintained one precious ritual. Once a month, he would scrape together enough money to take Lily out to a truly exceptional dinner. This was his silent rebellion against hardship. It was his way of teaching Lily that the world, despite its cruelty, held spaces of beauty and dignity, and that she deserved to occupy them without fear. He wanted her to internalize the self-worth that wealth often granted automatically. Lily, 7 years old, was a remarkable child, a joyful spirit with an uncanny, almost preternatural empathy. She often saw the underlying emotional reality of a person before an adult even saw their face. She was intensely attuned to suffering, particularly in children and those who appeared marginalized or weak. Tonight, they were inside La Lumiere. The environment was an intimidating landscape of quiet power, where the low hum of conversation served only to underscore the value of its patrons. It was a place where one's status was worn like a second skin. When the scarred girl appeared through the grand oak doors, the silence was instant, thick, and suffocating. The entire dining hall seemed to contract, pushing the air away from her. The collective response was not pity, but an aggressive physical manifestation of disgust and distaste. The whispers, carried easily across the now silent room, were sharp and undeniably malicious. "Who in God's name allowed that in here? It's truly offensive to look at. I've lost my appetite. This restaurant has an image to maintain. She ruins the ambiance." The girl, later identified as Alina, stood isolated in the center of the room. Her shoulders were hunched, a defensive posture against the onslaught of stares. She clutched a cheap, slightly frayed winter coat to her chest, and her eyes were brimming with shame and unshed tears. No one made eye contact. No one offered a single gesture of human welcome. A junior server, visibly uncomfortable, edged toward her. His voice was a panicked, low hiss. "Miss, you really should consider leaving now. It would be less disruptive." Alina managed a painful, barely audible whisper, her voice cracking with fear and cold. I just wanted a bowl of hot soup. I am so very cold." Daniel didn't just see a frightened girl. He saw the reflection of his late wife Sarah in the first moments after her burn injury. The confusion, the shame of being observed, and the desperate, silent plea for normalcy. He remembered the coldness of hospital rooms and the colder indifference of strangers. This is not just about a seat, he thought. This is about decency. He realized he couldn't teach Lily about courage if he himself sat still in the face of such flagrant cruelty. The check, already paid, was secondary to the lesson he needed to live. He stood up instantly. He felt the weight of judgment shift from Alina to himself. He heard the sharp intake of breath from the surrounding tables. Lily squeezed her father's hand firmly. "Daddy, you must help her. She looks so alone." Daniel walked towards Alina. He bent down, lowering himself physically to meet her gaze, neutralizing the power dynamic of the room. He projected an aura of immediate, uncomplicated safety. "What is your name, dear? Are you all right? You look like you need help," he asked, his voice calm and steady. She whispered her name. "I'm Alina. I just needed a moment to sit down." I'm exhausted. Daniel then returned to their table, pulled the empty chair next to Lily, and walked back to the girl. He offered the simple wooden chair with a gesture of ultimate dignity. Then sit with my daughter and me. This table is a place of refuge where every person deserves respect. The resulting uproar was intense, a cacophony of offended luxury. This is an absolute disgrace to the establishment. Is he seeking attention? Trying to play the hero? I absolutely forbid her from being near my family. Alina, panicked by the sudden intense focus, tried to pull away, but Daniel placed a firm, reassuring hand on her shoulder. Stay still, Alina. You are safe now. Ignore the noise. Lily, extending her scarf, a small gesture of immense warmth, to Alina. Here, sister, I brought this for myself, but you need it more. It will help you be warm. The seating of Alina, the deliberate act of inclusion in a room built on exclusion, was perceived as an affront by the wealthy diners. Several high-paying tables immediately demanded transfers to the opposite side of the restaurant. The air of aristocratic disgust was palpable, thick and cold. The atmosphere was no longer merely silent. It was humming with controlled, hostile energy. The whispers became bolder, harder, almost audible sentences that hung in the air. Someone call security, and she's disrupting the entire room. That's illegal. Daniel felt the collective breath of the room focusing on his spine, trying to force him to cave. Even Mr. Chen, the manager, clearly wrestled with his own conscience, but the sight of the restaurant owner's cousin shaking his head in disapproval was the final push he needed to betray his humanity for profit. Daniel knew this was a battle of wills, their entitlement against his ethics. He tightened his grip on the chair back, planting his feet firmly, refusing to be moved by their wealth. A woman in a magnificent diamond choker openly sneered at Daniel. We are paying hundreds of dollars for a private dining experience. Are we seriously expected to endure the sight of that disruption for our entire meal? Daniel slowly turned, fixing her with a stare that held the full weight of his quiet moral fatigue. The young lady is a human being, madam. She is not a thing, and she is certainly not that. Your expense does not entitle you to cruelty. The general manager, Mr. Chen, a man whose face was perpetually stretched into a forced, subservient smile, rushed to the table. His attempt at diplomacy was a thinly veiled attempt at segregation. Mr. Hayes, with the deepest respect, we are obligated to preserve the guests' expectations. Would you, your daughter, and your friend accept a complimentary table in our private back dining area? It would greatly assist with the harmony. Daniel instantly understood the meaning. Hide the unpresentable child away from the paying elite. He replied with controlled calmness. Mr. Chen, if we move, all three of us move. But let me be perfectly clear. By moving us, you are actively siding with the visible prejudice these people are showing towards a visibly injured minor. A businessman at a neighboring table laughed, a short, contemptuous sound. A man who defends charity cases belongs in the cheaper, less frequented section anyway. Let them all go. Lily, her small voice ringing with startling conviction, jumped up slightly. My daddy is the best person in the room. He is better than all of you put together. Daniel gently pulled Lily back down, but his focus snapped to Alina. Her head was bowed. Tears were silently soaking the scarf Lily had given her, and her entire body was shuddering violently. Her lips were turning a faint, alarming shade of blue. The shame, the cold, and the stress were causing a physical collapse. Alina, is the pain worsening? Talk to me, Daniel urged, his tone shifting instantly from stern father to focused caregiver. She could barely nod, her teeth chattering. My leg, the surgery, it hurts so much. The pressure is unbearable when I sit still. She was clearly struggling to catch her breath, bordering on hypercapnia due to panic and pain. Daniel, using his extensive experience from the trauma ward, immediately directed Lily to retrieve warm, clean napkins. He gently placed his hand on Alina's arm, guiding her through measured, slow breaths, attempting to regulate her panicked respiratory rate. The aggressive businessman, refusing to yield, challenged Daniel again. I demand to know your medical credentials. Who are you to practice medicine here? This is utterly unprofessional. Daniel ignored the personal attack, his eyes locked on Alina's pale face. His reply was measured, cutting through the noise with undeniable authority. I spent 5 years in a specialized pediatric burn and trauma unit. I understand acute post-operative pain and psychological stress in children. I know how to stabilize a patient in crisis. The only unprofessional behavior here is the lack of human decency. The surrounding diners exchanged shocked glances. The realization that this simple man was actually qualified to help, combined with his moral indictment, created a complex, uncomfortable silence. They respected his knowledge, but hated his use of it against their prejudice. Mr. Chen, utterly defeated, returned for one final, desperate plea. "Sir, please. Her appearance is genuinely frightening my high-value clients. We must find a solution. We need to call a taxi to send her home." Daniel looked directly at the manager, his eyes unwavering. "Your concern is not for a frightened child's health. Your concern is for your bottom line. You are attempting to expel an injured child because her trauma offends the shallow comfort of your wealthy guests." The entire room fell into a heavy, guilty silence. Every patron knew, deep down, the truth of Daniel's words. The sheer arrogance and moral failure of their collective action were laid bare. As Daniel continued to provide focused care, applying a cool napkin to Alina's forehead, the elderly waiter, who had been studying the fine details of Alina's gold locket, grabbed Mr. Chen's arm. His face was ghastly, his voice a frantic, barely audible rasp. "Manager! The logo on that locket! It's the Moretti crest! I've seen it on the chairman's private jet! We have made a colossal mistake! That child is who we think she is!" Mr. Chen, utterly terrified, seized the restaurant's reservation manifest. He frantically scrolled, locating the late-day booking under the name A. Moretti. His eyes widened to impossible circles, reflecting the cold horror of his realization. "Oh, almighty God! Mr. Hayes, you must understand. She is Alina Moretti, the only daughter and sole heir of Chairman Vittorio Moretti." Daniel froze, maintaining his composure to keep Alina calm. "Vittorio Moretti? The Moretti Group? The massive conglomerate that owns most of the medical supply chains and private hospitals across the continent," the older waiter confirmed, his body trembling from the revelation. "And the richest family in this entire nation. She is the crown jewel. This is a disaster." The moment the name Moretti, a name synonymous with untouchable power and staggering wealth, echoed, the restaurant exploded. The previously judgmental silence was instantly replaced by a toxic cacophony of fear, disbelief, and frantic self-preservation. Alina, hearing her identity brutally exposed, let out a small whimper, her fear escalating from shame to existential terror. She buried her head deeper into Daniel's chest. "Please, Uncle Daniel, don't let them look at me. I don't want them to know. I'm so tired of being filmed. I just wanted hot soup like a normal person." Daniel immediately stood, using his entire frame to shield her from the sudden, grotesque influx of attention. The patrons reacted with sudden, panicked theatrics. The diamond choker woman visibly paled, clutching her own throat as if choking on her previous judgment. The wealthy men fumbled for their phones, not to call help, but to frantically text their connections, trying to distance themselves from the disaster. They avoided Daniel's gaze as if it carried a disease. The wealthy guests who had been most vocal about her ruining the atmosphere lunged forward, hands outstretched in a sickening display of repentance. "Miss Moretti, oh, my sincere, deepest apologies. We had absolutely no idea. Please forgive our ignorance. We truly thought you were someone else." Daniel spoke, his voice ice cold, his moral outrage fully ignited. "If she were not the daughter of a billionaire, would your apology even exist? If she were merely a poor child, would you have shown this frantic, desperate concern? No, you waited until the dollar sign appeared before you recognized her humanity." The entire room, full of influential people, was completely silenced, unable to offer a single defense. Their hypocrisy was brutally exposed by the one man whose poverty they had openly mocked just moments before. Alina, completely overwhelmed by the sudden shift in attention from contempt to desperate fawning, could only squeeze her eyes shut. "It's worse now," she'd muttered into Daniel's collar. "Now they see the money, not the pain." Outside, a small crowd had gathered by the window, drawn by the commotion. They saw the wealthy diners suddenly bowing to a scarred child, and the public confusion only magnified the humiliation inside the exclusive restaurant. Suddenly, Alina cried out, clutching her lower leg with both hands, the stress triggering an agonizing spike of pain. It hurts. Daddy said I must be brave, but I can't. I don't want to be a burden on him anymore. She sobbed uncontrollably, her face contorted in pain and despair. Daniel immediately wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. You are not a burden, Alina. Never. You are a miracle. You are the strongest person in this room. The second twist. The slight jostling caused a folded photograph to fall, landing face up on the polished table. Lily picked it up and gasped quietly. It was the devastating image of Alina in the ICU, swathed entirely in white bandages, her face swollen, surrounded by tubes and wires. It was undeniable proof. This was not a minor injury. This was a miraculous survival from a near-fatal, third-degree burn trauma. The entire restaurant, those who could see the photo, gasped. The horrific reality of her trauma, the gravity of her ordeal, finally hit them with the force of a physical blow. Daniel, utilizing his emergency stabilization skills, carefully checked the swelling on her leg. He confirmed the clear indications of post-surgical inflammation being exacerbated by prolonged sitting. He instructed Lily to place the warm napkin beneath her injured knee. Then, with professional expertise and immense tenderness, he lifted Alina's leg and gently rested it across his own thigh, elevating it perfectly to reduce the immediate pressure and venous return pain. The patrons watched, their former contempt replaced by self-loathing. We are truly monsters. We saw her suffering and amplified it. To endure that, and then endure our mockery. God help us. Mr. Chen, the manager, finally knelt down. Regardless of the polished floor, his veneer of professionalism completely dissolved by shame. Miss Alina, I am utterly disgraced. Please forgive me. I should have protected you. Daniel gently stood, lifting Alina completely into his arms like a father carrying a sleeping child. He looked directly at the kneeling manager and the frozen patrons. I came here tonight to teach my daughter about kindness. You, sir, and the rest of you taught her a lesson about cruelty. Choose which lesson you want to carry tonight. Lily walked close beside him, touching Alina's hair with pure affection. She is the strongest in the whole world, Daddy. The restaurant remained utterly silent. No one dared to eat another bite. A renowned physician, alerted to the crisis in the name, hurried from a nearby VIP table. I am a private physician for the Moretti family. Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Your stabilization and elevation of her limb were expert. You saved her from a major complication. Daniel simply replied, his focus still on the girl in his arms. I spent years caring for my wife in the burn ward. I understand this pain intimately. The sleek, intimidating motorcade of the Moretti group arrived quickly, a testament to the family's immense power and swift reaction time. Daniel carried Alina out of La Lumiere, surrounded by highly trained bodyguards and the medical team. A female assistant manager, tears streaming down her face, stepped forward. Please forgive us, Miss Alina. We are so sorry. Alina remained silent, finding her only safe harbor pressed against Daniel's chest, protected from the world. Lily walked diligently beside them, her small, constant touch on Alina's arm, a more powerful sedative than any drug. Daniel gently placed Alina onto the specialized gurney. As the medics secured her, Alina reached out and grasped his hand tightly, her eyes pleading. Uncle Daniel, please come with me. Can you stay with me? Daniel looked at Lily, seeking permission. Lily nodded immediately, her expression serious and resolute. You must go, Daddy. She needs you now. I will be fine. The private doctor affirmed the request. Mr. Hayes, the chairman will absolutely insist on meeting you. She needs your calming presence right now. At the main Moretti hospital, Alina was transferred to a luxurious, quiet, gold-plated VIP recovery suite, a room that smelled of clean linen and subtle, expensive flowers, a world away from Daniel's humble apartment. Lily was permitted to stay. She sat beside the bed, pulling out her favorite picture book and reading in a low, soothing monotone, her voice a continuous comfort that banished the harshness of the medical environment. Alina held Lily's hand, her smile fragile but genuine. I wish I had a little sister just like you, Daniel responded, his heart swelling with pride and affection. You do now, dear. You have both of us. As Alina rested, Daniel shared a personal, intimate memory, a story rarely told, He spoke of his late wife, Sarah, and the years he spent as her primary caregiver after her severe burn accident. I wasn't a doctor, Alina, but I learned every protocol, every pain management technique, and every psychological trick to help her cope with the stares and the pain. I know what it's like to feel monstrous when you are only magnificent. He emphasized how Sarah had found immense courage, showing that survival was a process, not just an event. His words resonated deeply with the wealthy heiress, forging a bond far stronger than their massive social gap suggested. The attending nurse entered, checking the monitors. She spoke to Daniel with quiet deference, recognizing his genuine effect. "Mr. Hayes, your conversation has lowered Miss Moretti's heart rate significantly. Your presence is having a remarkable therapeutic effect on her recovery. She needs you." Daniel, still uncomfortable with the opulence and checking his watch nervously, tried to excuse himself. "I truly don't want to overstay. I need to be back for my early shift tomorrow." But Alina, now visibly relaxed under the influence of the drugs and the genuine company, spoke with a soft, determined resolution that surprised even the nurse. "No, Uncle, please stay. Just for a few hours. You and Lily are my best medicine." The three of them, the exhausted technician, the kind-hearted daughter, and the vulnerable heiress, shared simple bowls of artisanal soup brought by silent attendants. Lily happily chattered about her school projects. Alina listened, her face finally relaxed, a sound of genuine, faint laughter escaping her lips. The first time she had truly smiled since leaving the family compound weeks ago. Lily, witnessing Daniel's vulnerability and Alina's peace, understood the true meaning of the word family. It wasn't about blood, it was about shared survival and unconditional protection. She took her father's hand, a silent assurance that she approved of their new fragile bond. Daniel looked at the two girls, one his by birth, one his by choice of compassion, and felt a quiet completeness he hadn't known since Sarah's death. The three of them, sitting quietly in the gilded VIP room, formed an unexpected circle of healing. Daniel observed their pure connection, realizing that the greatest wealth lay not in the room's gilded fixtures, but in the simple, shared human vulnerability. His act of kindness had not only saved a life, but had brought him to a place where his genuine moral worth was finally and fully recognized. As the hour grew late and Daniel prepared to leave, the door opened. A man of immense, quiet power entered, Mr. Vittorio Moretti, Alina's father. His eyes were red-rimmed with worry, but his face held a look of powerful, uncompromising gratitude. Chairman Vittorio Moretti, the undisputed leader of the European medical industry, walked with urgent determination to his daughter's bedside. "Alina, my little warrior, you scared me to death." He then turned, his focus absolute, to Daniel. He didn't offer a polite handshake, but gripped Daniel's arm firmly, a gesture that acknowledged a bond of mutual respect. "Mr. Hayes, you saved my daughter, not just medically, but in the truest sense of her dignity. You are the only one in that entire room who did not judge her by her misfortune." Daniel met his gaze with characteristic modesty. "Sir, I only helped a child who needed me. No debt is owed. I simply followed my conscience." Moretti's eyes filled with moisture. "You were the only one who did not turn away. That is a rare commodity in my world." He opened his briefcase and presented Daniel with a sleek, gold-embossed folder, an executive employment profile. "I want to invite you to be the director of psychological recovery programs for the new Moretti Compassion Initiative, a global foundation focusing on young trauma victims. You have the heart that my money cannot purchase." Daniel stammered, overwhelmed. "Mr. Moretti, I am deeply honored, but I have Lily. I need guaranteed stability and time for her. I cannot compromise my role as her father." Moretti smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Your commitment to Lily is precisely why I need you. This position is built around your family. It includes a private office at the Foundation's headquarters, full access to our facilities, and absolute schedule flexibility. Your daughter is a therapeutic asset. Furthermore, your expertise as a technician who understands the machines and a caregiver who understands the patients is utterly unique." Lily, understanding the immense shift, hugged her father tightly. "Say yes, Daddy. We can help Sister Alina and all the people who feel hurt." Alina, watching the scene, spoke quietly, her voice full of soft pleading. "Uncle Daniel, please don't leave us now. We need you to stay." Daniel's hand was shaking as he looked at the contract. This wasn't just a job. It was an escape route from a decade of worry. Then, Alistair Moretti delivered the ultimate life-changing guarantee. And Mr. Hayes, the compensation package includes one non-negotiable term. We have reviewed Lily's medical profile. I am personally ensuring that Lily's suspected congenital heart condition will be fully diagnosed and treated by the world's leading specialists at absolutely zero cost to you. This is not philanthropy. This is the respect owed to the man who showed my family true moral courage. The emotional weight of years of financial burden and fear for Lily's health lifted in an instant. Daniel's composure shattered completely. He signed the contract, tears of gratitude and profound relief streaming down his face. He wasn't just signing for a salary, he was signing for Lily's health, security, and a future built on the foundation of one single act of profound kindness. The final scene: Daniel, Lily, and Alina walked together down the luminous hospital corridor. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting three long, connected shadows, the shape of a new, unconventional family. Alina's head was held high, her smile radiant. Daniel's exhaustion had been replaced by a dignified, quiet purpose. The world will try to teach you that value is measured by gold or beauty, but one simple act of kindness can change not only the life you save, but the entire trajectory of your own. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe.